particularly amidst the growth of New York's home care workforce that provides care for patients throughout our state. It is important to note that state controls labor regulations and Medicaid reimbursement rates that impact the wages and working conditions of home care aides. The State Department of Labor's regulation limits pay to 13 hours, even when long, grueling shifts can extend for as long as 24 hours. That's why we're passing this resolution today, to call on the governor and the state legislature to act on existing legislation and propose changes that can improve these conditions. We look forward to working with them to strengthen and support this vital workforce. We will also vote on the following pieces of legislation. Introduction 172, sponsored by Majority Leader Amanda Farias, would amend Local Law 33 of 2024 to clarify that any driver of a for-hire vehicle with an approved tablet in their vehicle would receive a minimum of 25% of the gross revenue it generates. The bill would also set the fee for the interior advertising company license at $500. I invite Majority Leader Farias to the podium to discuss her legislation.
Thank you, Speaker Adams. Good afternoon, everyone. Introduction 172 is an amendment to Local Law 33 and is a clarification to ensure drivers get what they deserve, companies are clear with their role, and drivers have a maximum opportunity. The amendments are as follows. 1, the language in this bill clarifies that drivers would receive a minimum of 25% of the gross income. It is important to add that this language as the minimum will encourage competition amongst tablet providers and rideshare companies to ultimately benefit the driver, and the gross income language will ensure that drivers receive their fair share of the overall revenue and that any administrative costs are not borne by the drivers. 25% is the floor, not the ceiling. That's what's important here, meaning that drivers and companies that they work for have plenty of opportunity to bring home more money to their families. Second, this amendment also establishes a $500 license fee for contracting companies that wish to provide tablets to their drivers. The fee amount was set based on the administration's user cost analysis and on the cost of processing the applications and licenses. The $500 amount is also in line with a lot of other similar fees companies already pay, like livery-based fees. To be clear, this is not a fee for the driver, but it is for the companies to pay and for the New York City Taxi and Limousine Commission to have proper oversight over the tablets. Thank you to everyone who worked on the original bill and this essential amendment with me and my office. Specifically, thank you to Utani, IDG, Lyft, Uber, for-hire vehicle drivers, and so many more. Appreciate the time, Speaker.
Thank you. Introduction 1B, sponsored by myself, would designate the Animal Care Centers of New York City facility in Queens as the Paul A. Vallone Queens Animal Care Center, named for former council member Paul Vallone, who was a colleague and a dear friend of mine and many others in this body. Former council member Vallone was a passionate advocate for animals and their care, and he advanced many bills to support their well-being while he served in the council. This includes his bill establishing Local Law 123 of 2018, which requires the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene to ensure that full-service animal shelters are operated in all 5 boroughs. Councilmember Vallone's legislation was the culmination of a multi-generational effort that started over 2 decades ago under his proud father, Speaker One, as I call him, Council Speaker Peter Vallone Sr., and continued with his brother, former council member Peter Vallone Jr. I do thank the Vallone family for their dedicated public service to our city and New Yorkers overall, and their long-standing commitment to the welfare of precious animals. This renaming is a fitting tribute, and I'm so proud that we can continue to honor Councilmember Vallone's memory and the legacy in his and my own home borough of Queens. Introduction 17B, sponsored by Councilmember Justin Brannan, would require the installation of electric vehicle charging equipment in open parking lots and parking garages with 10 or more spaces that are licensed by the Department of Consumer and Worker Protection. It also sets future requirements for all other lots and garages with 10 or more spaces. The existing public charging network for electric vehicles throughout New York City is small, which poses a barrier to accelerating electric vehicle adoption. This bill aims to rectify that shortage in our city. I invite Councilmember Brannan to give remarks on his legislation.
Thank you, Speaker. Electric cars will drive us to a sustainable future, but we can't expect drivers to make the switch from fossil-fueled power to electric vehicles if the city is not built out to support them. So I believe we have a responsibility at every level of government to make it easier to own and operate electric cars in the city. This bill that we've been working on for quite a while, along with Queensborough President Donovan Richards, will make EV charging stations more widely available than ever before in the city of New York, ensuring that wherever you live, visit, or work in New York City, you can charge your vehicle. We can shape our infrastructure in a way that empowers New Yorkers to make the switch and drive vehicles that reduce greenhouse gas emissions, combat climate change, and promote energy independence. I believe if we build it, they will come. Thank you.
Thank you. And Introduction 4A, sponsored by Councilmember Alexa Aviles, would require cruise ships with shore power capability to connect to shore power systems when docked, whenever shore power is available, and it is safe and practicable to do so. This requirement would be enforced by the New York City Economic Development Corporation, or EDC, which administers the 2 cruise terminals in New York City. EDC would also be required to create and regularly update community traffic mitigation plans in the neighborhoods around each terminal in consultation with the Department of Transportation, the Police Department, and members of the public who reside in the neighborhoods surrounding cruise terminals. I invite Councilmember Aviles to speak about her important legislation.
Oh, thank you so much, Speaker. So after a tremendous amount of work on behalf of the community of Red Hook, I am just so proud to be here today to vote on a piece of legislation that will mean significant air quality gains for our communities, not only for our communities in Red Hook and the communities in the Pier, New York City, but all of New York City, as we're such a small geographic city for decades to come. So today we are going to vote to pass Intro 4, a bill that will require ships coming to New York City to plug in to clean shore power system where it already exists in Brooklyn and where it will exist in Manhattan. It will also require that contracted entities come up with a traffic mitigation plan that will hopefully prevent the sort of nightmare occurring that has happened and is happening in Red Hook in the summertime, a direct result of EDC and cruise operators having no plan at all. I want to thank the Speaker for her support, thank Councilmember Bottcher for being a steadfast ally and a co-prime sponsor, thank Councilmember Farias in her role as Chair of the Economic Development Committee and as the Majority Leader, and of course to community members who've kept the heat up since the mayor signed this agreement with a cruise terminal without ever consulting the actual community members and thinking about the impacts. From the jump, the effort to pass Intro 4A, the Our Air, Our Water Act, was organized by and for the residents of Red Hook. This is a community-led victory that's been in the making for years. In fact, the existing shore power that is currently in Red Hook is a direct result of longstanding community members' advocacy. Unfortunately, outer boroughs like ours are routinely on the receiving end of policies made about us without us, but Intro 4A is an important intervention and a reversal of this harmful top-down tendency we often see in local government. We are at our best as legislators when the bills we write reflect resident wants and desires and engage them in that process. And while this measure is far from perfect, it addresses key environmental impacts and traffic mitigation concerns that have long gone unaddressed. I welcome any questions, and I just lastly want to say, it's opportune to also be with my colleague who is passing legislation around electrification of cars and building that infrastructure. These are climate justice wins for our communities, for New York City, and it brings us closer to what we know is the existential threat that we are facing, which is climate change. We must deal with it with urgency, with intentionality, And we must set the standard that our city is truly going to lean in and invest in the things that we know will keep our communities healthy and safe. And with that, I thank you all, and I thank the speaker and all the legislative staff that worked on this bill. Deep appreciation and thanks. Thank you.
This does conclude our stated agenda, and with that, we will take on-topic questions first.
So can you kind of describe the issue in Red Hook? How much pollution do the ships generate? And also, I believe that one of the MSC cruise ships are getting bigger and bigger, which does not connect to the power at that terminal. So can you talk a little bit about, the pollution that's being generated and then the complications when these cruise ships are bigger and bigger and they can't connect?
Yeah, absolutely. So what we know from multiple studies is that cruise ship idling is equivalent to 34 tractor trailers idling at the same time. 34,000 tractor trailers, idling at the same time. Another study points to cruise ship idling to be equivalent to 1 million cars idling at the same time. It is clear, and the evidence is clear, that cruise emissions are highly, highly polluting. And that is just what we're seeing in the air. We're not talking about what happens in the water. We're not talking about the ancillary services, right, that cruises require in terms of the supplies, right, the additional trucks, the additional cars. So what we saw in Red Hook with MSC is a ship that hosts 5,000 passengers, a crew of 2,500 people, and our community suddenly had hundreds of additional cars for every passenger that was coming in at a very short period of time. So you can just imagine the congestion that would create. In particular, the Red Hook geography is one way in, one way out. Any kink in the system there, you feel it over the entire neighborhood. So the traffic issue is really profound and requires actual management and planning to make sure that you understand how you can resolve issues, how you can mitigate and reduce the amount of cars that are coming into a neighborhood at a certain time. The second part of your question?
The newest MSC cruise
That's
that
right.
comes into Red Hook.
The shore power.
Not connected to it.
Yeah, so the problem that we have had is that the actual apparatus to connect into shore power, the mobile jib, wasn't long enough and couldn't actually connect into the ship. And so it's been several years where it hasn't been fully functional because it hasn't been able to connect. So the EDC has been working on it. Of course, we feel like this should have been done several years ago and fixed, and now there is critical urgency around fixing the jib so that, in fact, it will plug in and the ships will be able to turn off their diesel engines while they are at berth. And that's what we would like to see all over New York City. And in fact, countries around the world, cities in the United States are very urgently moving to shore power, recognizing the deep impacts of the cruise industry. And lastly, I'll say, the industry is trying to think of other technology to capture their pollution. I think we want to be very clear that we will be monitoring false solutions. Scrubbers are often noted as a solution, and in fact what that does is capture the carbon in the air and dump it into the water. And that is not an appropriate solution for us either. So we will be closely monitoring the industry and what we are doing as a city and making sure we set a high standard to protect our health and well-being. Sorry, that was very long.
No, I'm excited about this bill. You can talk about it all day.
This one's for the councilwoman again, Antoine 55, just to follow up what Marla was saying.
Yeah.
Have you heard from this particular, either you, the EDC, the MSG, Marina,
Yeah.
the big ship, have you heard from them that they are willing to abide by what's now about to be the rules?
So I haven't heard directly from them. I expect they're going to abide by New York City law. And this entire industry has been demanded by people globally to do better. We recognize it is unrefuted, the amount of pollution that is coming out of this kind of industry. And so our city, like cities across the world, are going to say, you have to do better. If you would like to be part of this market in New York City, then you're going to need to do better by us. Yeah, thank you.
Can I just ask one more question about the local businesses? One of the complaints, Councilwoman, was that people bypass local businesses, they don't benefit economically. Is there anything in the works that would help the local businesses get people to stay there?
Yeah, that's correct. It's part of the issue in my comments where it said, deals are done about us without us. This deal did not benefit our surrounding community. What we saw was, and what we're seeing is people come in and they go directly to Manhattan. They don't actually wander around the neighborhood. They don't enjoy our incredible businesses, our cultural institutions, and that's a problem. That's a planning and investment problem is how we see it. So we've been working with the EDC on everything from signage to improving the terminal, to making sure that folks in the terminal actually know this amazing community that they're in. So all of that, line mitigation, how we interact, but the business community has been front and center in all of these negotiations and has really been demanding that the EDC make sure that they actually invest. Everything from not only patrons to the local businesses, but what are the actual jobs? We subsidize these giant corporate behemoths that make billions of dollars, and I can't tell you if there's one Red Hook resident actually employed in any of that whole transaction. But we want to correct that. We feel like we want to be the host, but we should also be part of that economic benefit, and our businesses should be thriving. Our community should be a partner in this. Thank you.
Council Speaker, I wanted to ask on the governor putting the National Guard and the state troopers in the subway system, expanding bag checks. Happy to hear your thoughts on that, but I have a question related. As you know, through last year, the governor was picking up the overtime tab for the NYPD to have officers in the subway system. Mayor Adams says that work brought down crime. The funding dried up. If Governor Hochul does not give the city funding to cover overtime for the NYPD, will the council step in and provide the funding for more OT for the subway policing?
Policing and OT is an interesting subject for the council, Dan. It is something that we've taken a look at for years and years and years, realizing the high amount of overtime with policing in general. That is not to say that we would not be willing to take a look at it as we do every budget session. As far as the Guard coming into the subway, there are ways to address this issue. Other ways to address it other than more policing into the subway system. We need to take a look at the root causes. Where is the investment in mental health service? I looked at footage on a news station the other day, might have been yours, where it showed a subway car pulling into a station and you saw various homeless individuals wrapped in blankets, shoeless. Where are the services for those individuals, some of whom have been off of their meds for months and months and perhaps even years? I would love to see those investments coming into our city, stronger mental health solutions that actually do prevent people from cycling through the criminal justice system. That should be our focus.
Well, so I understand the root causes. You're saying there's nothing to be done while you're figuring out how to get people in the mental health services they need rather than having doctors stabilize them, re-release them back into the streets in a cycle. I understand you want to invest in that, but that's an investment over time. Right now, you're seeing some pretty vicious public attacks on workers and people who take the subway. Policing, covering overtime to get more policing in the subway, not something you're looking at?
There are also MTA police as well. I would think that that would have been a priority more so than bringing in the National Guard into the subway system.
And just on the issue of OT and the NYPD, you said you were open to it. I just want to clarify.
We're open to it every year. We have to take a look at it through our budget procedure.
There's no more off topic, that'll be all.
Thank you all.
Could I ask something about the how many stops at for a colleague at New York One, who'd be interested? For my colleague, are you proud that the How Many Stops Act passed now that the NYPD is going to be able to do the bag checks? I guess my colleague is asking, now that you have the How Many Stops Act, you get more data, do you think that makes it okay that NYPD, if they're doing these bag checks, you'll now have the data on whose bag they're checking?
Well, the How Many Stops Act has to do with level 1 regardless of what that level 1 looks like.